Welcome back. This is part 2 of my tutorial on making your own scales. In part 1 we covered making the two sides. If you missed that, there's a link down in the comments. In this part I'm going to cover making the wedge, pinning it together. Here's what you'll need. The wedge is the simplest of things to do. All you need is one of your two scales, your material that you're going to be making your wedge out of. It can be the same colour, it can be different, it's up to you. But I'd use at least 3mm material to start with. It can be thicker because this is going to be quite easy to shape afterwards. So what you need to do is just, if you've got your razor that's going to go into your scales, just have a rough idea how long your wedge needs to be and make sure you make it just a bit longer, and then you've got something to work with. Okay, put your scales on your material that you're going to be using. Again, I've used masking tape just so I can draw it and it makes it easy to see. Make sure that if you have your flat line as the back of your wedge, make sure that's at an angle. You don't want it so that the top is shorter than the bottom. You want it either flat or the other way around. Okay, and then just trace that out. Okay, go cut that out. I'll cut it out exactly the same as I cut the scales out, and I'll be back in a jiffy. Okay, my wedge is chopped out, it's ready for shaping. The rule of thumb is the bit of the wedge that's nearest the toe should be half of the width of the spine, and then the angle should be the same as that at the tang. But that's not a set, it's not a set rule. If you want a wedge, then make it slightly bigger, not a wedge, sorry, a spacer. It's going to be flat, make it a bit bigger, but really you can experiment with angles, see what works best. Nothing's that important. The easiest way to shape it is with something like a lineature or a belt sander, which I usually do, but for purposes of the video I'll do it on a piece of sandpaper, seeing as most of you will have that. Just make sure that whatever your sandpaper is on is flat, so there's no bumps transferred to your wedge. Okay, you want to put pressure on the side of the spacer which is furthest away from your razor. Yeah, that's right. So then your scales will be wedged out. Okay, you only need to do the one side, you don't need to do both sides. Okay, let's go. Use quite low grip paper for this, or this will take you quite a while and lots of effort. As you can see, slightly wedged. I don't want to put a big wedge on this. To check it's flat, just put it on the glass, make sure it doesn't wobble. It's flat. Smooth out your inside. Get rid of any sharp points on that. And that's your wedge done, ready to attach to your scales. The next stage is just gluing the wedge that we've made onto one of the scales. Not both, just one. And then we pin the other one to that. So what we need is the razor that's going to be used, we need to line up the pivot holes. And make a note of where that toe goes on the scales. You can even make a very, very slight scratch where that toe hits. I'm just going to make a mental note of it. But then I'm going to use some masking tape just to mark where it goes. Recheck. I'm going to give myself about 2 millimeters of clearance. So I'm going to put my wedge right up to that line and hold it with my thumb. I don't want it to move. This is the tricky bit. Open a little gap with super glue. Just put a tiny bit of glue in there. Only a little bit. With kitchen roll, just clean up any trails of super glue that have come out. Okay. And that's it, you can leave that to dry, and when that's dry it's time to pin. We've got our wedge now attached to the scales. We now need to set the angle for the holes ready for the pins. The way we do this, put your scales together and see how big your gap is at the pivot. In your head, just approximate half that distance plus half of the wedge. If you make something that's that size to drill through your wedge, it'll give you the right angle to drill through for your pins. And then it'll be half that width minus the wedge for the side that doesn't have the wedge attached. Okay, now we're ready for pinning. You're going to need some very basic tools for pinning. You want a hammer for pinning. It should between 4 ounces, maximum 8 ounces. You need something to be used as an anvil. What I use is just a 16-ounce hammer with a tiny dent drilled into it for helping to round the pins. A file, a vise, and a pinning kit. First thing you do, secure your rod into your vise. File the top flat. Next thing, with your peening hammer, we're going to be mushrooming the top of it. We're going to hit in very, very small hits in a circular motion so it peens nice and even all the way around. Take it out of the vise when that's done. Get yourself a collar. Slide it over the end that you haven't peened. You just need to make it a little easier to get the washer on. Okay, you see, collar is on the end of the rod. Get one of your scales, pass that through. Other scale, and check that the rod's straight. Check that all your scales line up. Put your next collar on. And get your wire cutters. Trim it to about 1 millimeter away from that collar. Now what we want to do is file that rod down. So we've got about 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter of rod showing. Careful not to scratch your scales. Okay, then we put the side that we've peened already into the dent in your anvil or your hammer. And again, same thing. Start peening all the way around, very, very small taps. Turn over so you round both equally. Just note that if you hammer too hard, you could bend the pins. So take your time and they won't bend. Okay, we're pinned together and the next step is going to be shaping the wedge. Don't clamp too hard and make sure your scales are lined up. Okay, the wedge is shaped. I'll sand and polish that the same way we did the scales, and then we'll be pinning it to the razor. I've finished polishing the wedge. It's now the last part, pinning the razor on. I've already mushroomed the top of this rod, ready. So same as before, one collar goes on, but then we put that through one side of the scales, through the pivot. We'll put on a washer, put the razor on, don't put it on backwards. Second washer. Rod through the other side of the scales. Last collar. Then trim with wire cutters again. Exactly the same as before. I'm just going to file down the top of that rod so we've got 0.5 millimetre to 1 millimetre left showing. Just be careful not to scratch your scales because it's really easy at this point. Exactly the same as before, we're going to pin it together. We're going to keep going until, when you hold the razor this way up, it doesn't fall out. Hey, one razor, nicely rescaled. I'd love to see your attempts, sorry. If you make some using this video, let me know and let me see your work. And please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you again. Thanks for watching.